Let's go to Scott Taylor. Scott joining us now. Scott Taylor is the Republican congressional nominee for the 2nd District of Virginia, and he is running to replace Scott Ridgel, who is retiring. By the way, Scott got kicked out of the Republican Party of Virginia Beach, not a moment too soon, as far as I'm concerned. Not a fan of his, but I am very excited about Scott Taylor going to Congress and representing the 2nd District. Scott, good to have you with us.
John, good morning. How's everything going?
Never better. Just got back from a week off, so I feel fabulous. Hey, let's get to the other day you were on Fox News, and I saw your interview. I thought it was excellent, by the way, talking about Donald Trump getting classified briefings. Now, obviously, you know something about that, being a former Navy SEAL and all that. Can you shed some light on that for our audience?
Sure. Well, at any major presidential candidate of the parties, of course, at a certain time starts to get briefings, because obviously you don't want to just go right into the job if he or she wins without any knowledge of threats, or general knowledge, of course, to threats to this nation. Plus, I think it's good for both of them to be able to tailor their message and what they would do, of course, in a way that, of course, doesn't divulge classified information, but at least they're cognizant of it and what's going on with the threats. I think it was an excellent choice by Mr. Trump to pick General Flynn, to take him there. Obviously, he headed up the intelligence agency, so he would be then able to interpret and basically advise Mr. Trump on what he's hearing. Because if some of the stuff that he probably heard, he's probably never heard. You know what I mean? He just seen stuff in the news, but nothing like this. So I think it was an excellent choice. It's something that, as a military guy, a former military guy, I have a lot of confidence in General Flynn. I think he's done an excellent job, and it was a great choice to bring him.
All right, now, so Trump is getting military briefings. We saw a poll recently in the Washington Post, I believe, showing Clinton with a 2-1 lead in Hampton Roads. That kind of shocked me. Obviously, if she wins Hampton Roads, she's going to win the state because she's going to roll big numbers up in Northern Virginia. What is going on here?
She's got to do. You're absolutely right. Mr. Trump's got to do very well in Hampton Roads if he wants to win Virginia. You know that very well. Those polls. It's very early with the polls. We're on the ground all the time. That's not what I'm hearing. I'm not hearing 2-1 type of responses from people. So I'm skeptical of those polls. And I think there's been a couple of polls in the past days that has Mr. Trump really close. So I just think the polls right now, it's a lifetime away, as you very well know, to November. So I think things will change. One debate performance could sway things on either side, because they're going to be well watched, as you can imagine. But I'm on the ground in Hampton Roads because we have a campaign here, obviously, and I'm not hearing 2-1 numbers against Mr. Trump. I think it's a lot closer than that.
All right, so you think we're losing? He's losing in Hampton Roads. I mean,
I think he made a big mistake. I was public about that. I think with the Khan family, regardless of who they are and everything, and Democrats, that's something you just don't get engaged with.
Yeah. Well, I think you know what. If you look at this when the campaign started heading south, that you can really look at getting into that ridiculous feud with the Khan family made no sense at all. He should have simply said, hey, my heart goes out for them, and then moved on to something else. It was just not advisable. And I think it was just one of those things where they were taking a close look at him. That didn't feel good to people. Now, you've also got Clinton spending millions and millions of dollars in ads. The Trump campaign hasn't responded. Let's go to the Scott Taylor for election campaign. How does that look?
Excellent. Everything's going very well. The feedback that we're getting on the ground is very positive. We're doing what we need to do as a campaign, reorganizing for the general, raising money, meeting with folks that may not have been on our side and are now. It's going great. We feel very, very good. My opponent, I've seen her one time, so we feel great.
I think you're in good shape. But look, you can't take anything for granted. Let's go to this Iranian deal, Scott. I know you've been very critical of it. Now it appears that this $400 million was in the form of a ransom. First, the administration says, it's mere coincidence. One had nothing to do with the other. It's just like, wow, these things happen. Then the State Department says, well, we used it as leverage. What does that mean?
They're trying to thread the needle around saying the word ransom. Of course it was a ransom. if you're using it as leverage, you're using it as a ransom. I mean, it's now public that they held on to the money before the Iranians left the people, and the Iranians held on the people before they left the money. It was a ransom. So I don't know. I mean, I think that Congress has got to be bold in regaining their oversight over the executive branch, regardless if a Republican or a Democrat wins the White House. That's our responsibility. If I'm elected, that will be my responsibility. We have an executive branch that's out of balance in terms of power right now, and they're certainly taking advantage of that, and it needs to be reined back in.
Absolutely. I tell you, Scott, when you get to Congress and you are going to get elected, you're going to Congress, you're going to get sworn in January. Well, what is going to be your top priority? The one thing, regardless of who gets elected president, when we Google Scott Taylor on January 28th, what are we going to find?
Well, I have three priorities, but certainly for our area, sequestration is the number one, to me, is the number one threat to our area in terms of defense, in terms of to the country and national security. It has to be. We have to get rid of it. We have to be able to thread a needle between fiscal hawks and military hawks to make sure that we're not having indiscriminate cuts to our military, which of course impacts us locally, but it impacts our nation, impacts us around the world, our national security. We've got to have more stability and we have to rebuild our military to deal with threats of today and tomorrow. So that's one of my main issues, obviously. But so is the economy, dealing with overreaching regulations and unelected bodies that aren't, like we just talked about with Congress, that aren't getting proper oversight from the legislative branch. We've got to do something about the $2 trillion overseas. We've got to cut a deal with dealing with our corporate tax rate and that money to bring it back into this economy. And then our veterans, obviously, our area is, as you know, this congressional district has more veterans in active duty than anyone in the nation. And I don't think we've taken care of our vets properly, so we've got to get in there and change the culture of the VA.
What about the Scott Taylor staff? What is that going to look like?
Well, legally, I can't say exactly what that will be, or even propose that to someone. But we're going to have a great staff. I think you'll have some continuity. Some folks that may be there now to help us move forward. You're going to have someone who on the local area. Obviously, we're going to have a strong military advisor who's going to be able to demand or command respect, basically, with the local military bases and stuff like that. We'll have the same up in Washington. I want top people. I want to have dynamic decision makers who are able to think with clarity under chaos and want to get things done, because that's what I want to do.
All right. That sounds like you've thought that through, Scott, and you have a good plan. Do you have any campaign events coming up you want to share with our audience?
John, honestly, we're going to, in the next week or two, we're going to start doing what we did before, where we will go around the district and hold events, sort of town hall-like style events at restaurants and or other locations that just bring people out and answer their questions. Anything that's on their mind, it's just going to be bigger than what we did before. That's going to be starting up in the next week or two. But we'll be trailblazing the district like we did in the primary. Like you said, take nothing for granted. We want to win big, and obviously want to help the top of the ticket in our area. Now,
President Obama is going to bring the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal up in the lame duck session. He's already said that. They've already got things in motion for that. You are not going to be there if that comes up in lame duck. Scott Ridgel says he will vote in favor of that. Scott Taylor says no. Would you exert any pressure if you get elected big on Ridgel to change his vote and reflect the will of the district?
Let me preface it by saying Scott Ridgel has been wonderful. He's been very, very helpful to us and trying to help out. Obviously, if we win in a transition. I'll just say that we'll be having a lot of conversations moving forward.
All right. That's a good answer, which you're basically saying maybe, right? Is that a maybe?
Sure. I mean, like I said, we're in good contact. I have a great relationship with Scott. He's been extremely helpful and very gracious. And I'm sure we'll be having plenty of conversations about not just transitioning, but also policy and stuff like that.
All right. Sounds good. I want to thank Scott Taylor for being with us. Scott, what's your website?
ScottTaylor.us, ScottTaylor.us. Appreciate you having me on as always, John.
All right, Scott, hang in there. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network.